The sky above the kingdom burned with the last light of sunset, streaks of red and gold bleeding into the clouds. In the courtyard of the castle, banners fluttered in the evening breeze, each emblazoned with the sigil of the wolf-blooded clan. Tonight was not an ordinary night. Tonight, KL, the alpha of the clan, was to be married. Celine stood in the shadows behind one of the tall stone pillars, her heart heavy. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her hands were clenched tightly at her sides. From here, she could see the entire courtyard, the gathered nobles, and the glowing altar where Kale would pledge himself to another. She had no right to be here. She had no claim to him. Yet, she could not stay away. Kale looked handsome in his ceremonial armor, the polished steel reflecting the last rays of the sun. His golden eyes scanned the crowd, but they stopped for a moment on her. The brief connection sent a shock through Celine's chest, one that she had felt countless times before. Memories of shared laughter, secret training sessions, and unspoken promises danced behind her eyes. The bride, Lyra, approached the altar with a calm smile, radiant in her flowing gown. Celine's stomach twisted. She had always known this moment might come. KL had duties, obligations beyond them both. He was the alpha, the leader, bound by tradition and expectation. Yet seeing it unfold, seeing him vow himself to another, it felt like a knife pressed into her heart. Celine had loved him in silence for years. Not out of weakness, but out of understanding. Kael had been hers in ways no one else could ever see. But the world outside their shared moments was cruel and unyielding. Duty often outweighed desire. The ceremony began. A hush fell over the courtyard as the priest recited the old vows, words that bound hearts and clans alike. Kale's voice rang clear and steady as he spoke his words to Lyra. Celine's throat tightened. She felt the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down, trying to remind her of her place in the shadows. And yet, Kale's eyes found hers again. A flicker of regret, of longing, passed across his face. Celine's heart thumped painfully. The world seemed to narrow to that single glance. In that moment, nothing else existed. The crowd, the banners, the priest's voice, only him and her. As the ceremony continued, Celine's mind wandered back to the nights they had spent together in secret. When the moon had been high, Kale had taken her to the cliffs beyond the forest, where the wind roared and the stars seemed close enough to touch. They had laughed, sparred, and spoken truths they would never admit in daylight. In those moments, he had been only hers, and she had been only his. But now, as the final words of the vow echoed through the courtyard, Selene felt the bitter sting of reality. The crowd erupted in applause. Kale and Lyra stood at the altar, hands joined, smiles polite but stiff. The wedding band slid over Lyra's finger, and the crowd cheered louder. Celine's hands curled into fists, the cold stone of the pillar biting into her knuckles. She turned away, unwilling to watch any longer. The sound of laughter and music floated through the air, as nobles danced and celebrated. Celine stepped into the quiet corridors of the castle, her mind racing. How could she stay silent any longer? How could she watch him pledge himself to someone else, when she had loved him all her life? Footsteps echoed behind her. Celine froze, her heart leaping. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to see who approached. Celine. The voice was low, commanding, yet soft, carrying a weight that made her knees weak. She turned. Kael stood there, his armor catching the torchlight, eyes unreadable. For a moment, neither spoke. The noise of the celebration faded, leaving only the two of them in the shadowed hallway. "I should not be here," she whispered. Her voice trembled, betraying more emotion than she intended. "And yet, you are," he said, stepping closer. His hand reached out, hovering in the air, as if debating whether to touch her. The tension between them was almost unbearable. Celine's chest ached. Cale's gaze softened. "I wish things could be different," he said quietly. "I wish I could tell the world what I feel. But my duty comes first." Celine's throat tightened. "I know," she said. "I have always known." They stood like that for a long moment. The space between them filled with memories, longing, and unspoken words. Outside, the laughter of the celebration seemed distant, almost unreal. Finally, Cale spoke again. "Tonight, it will be hard for both of us. But I need you to be safe. The court. Not everyone here is our friend." Celine swallowed the lump in her throat. "I can take care of myself." He nodded, but there was a flicker of worry in his eyes. "I know. And that is why I trust you." Silence fell between them, heavy with meaning. Celine wanted to reach out, to close the distance, to hold him, and never let go. But she could not. The world demanded restraint. The world demanded sacrifice. Then a loud cheer from the courtyard reminded them both of their reality. Kyle straightened, his expression hardening, the mask of the alpha returning. "Go back to the shadows," he said gently. "Tonight, you must remain hidden." Celine hesitated. She wanted to protest, to tell him that she could not simply watch him marry another. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded silently and retreated, her heart a storm of emotion. As she walked through the corridors, her mind replayed the sight of Cale at the altar. The brief moment when their eyes had met. Something had passed between them in that glance. Something forbidden, yet undeniable. Her heart whispered that this was not the end, not for them. In her chambers, Celine sat by the window, staring out at the glowing auroras that streaked the night sky. She could still feel the warmth of Cale's gaze, the pull of his presence, even from afar. The wind carried a chill, but it could not touch the fire burning in her chest. Tonight, she thought, I will not disappear completely. I will remain. I will wait. And when the time comes, he will find me. But even as she whispered these words to herself, a shadow moved across the courtyard below her window. Someone was watching, and it was not the celebration guests. Celine's pulse quickened. The shadow moved closer, gliding over the stones like a living darkness. Celine's fingers tightened on the windowsill. Her instincts, honed from years of training, screamed at her that danger was near. Suddenly, the shadow paused, and a figure stepped into the moonlight. Her breath caught. Kyle. He was alone, the weight of the wedding still heavy on his shoulders. Yet there was a fire in his eyes, a fire that had nothing to do with duty, nothing to do with the crown. It was the fire of recognition, of desire, of a bond that could not be broken by vows or tradition. Celine's heart leapt into her throat. He took a cautious step forward, then another. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, warm and insistent. "You're mine," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "No one else can have you. No one else can have you." Celine's eyes widened. The words hung in the air between them like a promise, a challenge, a truth too powerful to ignore. Before she could respond, the distant echoes of celebration reminded them of the world waiting outside. They could not linger. Yet, for that fleeting moment, the universe had shrunk to only them, the alpha and the warrior who had loved him in silence for far too long. The wind carried whispers of the future, of battles yet to come, of curses and secrets that would test their bond. And as Celine looked into Cale's eyes, she realized that the night had changed forever. Tonight, shadows had moved, hearts had stirred, and love unspoken and forbidden had finally declared itself. The castle hummed with the energy of celebration. Candles flickered along the corridors, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone walls. Celine moved quietly through the halls, her steps careful, her senses alert. The wedding had ended, but the night was far from over. Kale's presence lingered in her thoughts, his words, "You're mine," burning in her mind like fire against ice. Celine had always been skilled at moving unnoticed, a shadow within the castle. Tonight, that skill served her well. She avoided the dancing nobles, the clinking of goblets, and the soft laughter echoing through the grand halls. Her eyes were fixed on the signs Kael had left her. He had been subtle, as always. A small carved wolf hidden behind a tapestry. A folded note in the library's quiet corner, sealed with a familiar emblem. Each message was a thread, a lifeline, drawing her closer to him even when he could not be near. Celine reached the library, her fingers brushing the cold stone of the walls as she entered. The room smelled of old parchment and smoke from the fireplace. A single candle burned, its light flickering as if waiting for her. On the table lay another note, sealed with Kael's mark. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. The message was brief. "Meet me in the northern tower. Midnight. Alone." Her heart leapt. The northern tower was dangerous, isolated, and usually forbidden. Yet Kael had never asked her to take a risk without reason. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into her cloak, then moved silently through the corridors, careful to avoid any curious eyes. The castle had grown quieter, the celebration fading into whispers and shadows. Celine reached the spiral staircase, leading to the northern tower. Each step echoed softly in the empty stairwell, the sound mixing with the distant hum of music and laughter from the courtyard below. At the top of the tower, she paused, listening. The wind outside rattled the windows, carrying the scent of the forest and the distant mountains. She stepped inside the circular room, where moonlight spilled across the floor, revealing Kael waiting. He was leaning against the stone wall, arms crossed, his golden eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. For a moment, he looked almost weightless. The burdens of the day lifted as he smiled at her. "You came," he said, his voice low but steady. "I always do," Celine replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Her heart beat fast, a mixture of fear and anticipation. Kael stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Tonight, I had to see you," he said. Even if only for a moment, Celine's gaze fell to the floor. "You are bound by duty. I am bound by shadows. We cannot, we should not. You are my shadow only in the eyes of others." Kael interrupted, his tone firm but gentle. "To me, you are always the one who stands beside me, the one who understands me." Celine looked up, meeting his eyes. The longing in them mirrored her own. She wanted to reach for him, to close the distance, to feel his presence fully. But the world outside these walls was dangerous, and Kael's position as alpha made their bond even more complicated. Kael moved closer, his hand hovering near hers. "I cannot promise you the world, Celine, but I can promise that I will not abandon you. Not now. Not ever." Her chest tightened. "I cannot wait for a day that may never come. I cannot watch you marry another again," she said, her voice breaking slightly. He sighed, his golden eyes darkening with pain. "I know, and I hate that you must. Duty is a cruel chain, and I am bound by it, as much as you are." For a moment, silence wrapped around them, heavy and intimate. The wind howled outside, rattling the tower windows. Yet inside, they found a small bubble of stillness. "I have enemies," Kael said suddenly, his gaze sharp. "There are those in the court who would see me fail, who would harm anyone close to me. You must be careful, Celine." Celine nodded, her hand brushing against his, feeling the warmth of his skin. "I can take care of myself," she said, more firmly this time. "But I will follow you, Kael. Always." He smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and worry in his expression. "That is why I trust you," he said. The moment was interrupted by a faint noise, a creak of the stairs below, a shadow moving against the moonlight. Selene stiffened, her instincts screaming. Cale's hand went to the hilt of his sword. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "Do not let them see you." They moved silently to the narrow window that overlooked the courtyard. Below, a figure slipped through the shadows, moving toward the castle gates. It was not a guard, not an ally. Something in the movement, the confidence, the way the figure avoided the torches, told them this was someone dangerous. Cale's jaw tightened. "A spy," he muttered. "Or worse." Selene's heart pounded. The world outside their stolen moment had returned, harsher and more dangerous than ever. She could feel the weight of her feelings, her loyalty, and the risks all at once. "Do you think they suspect us?" she asked softly. Cale shook his head. "Not yet. But they will. And when they do, we must be ready." He stepped back from the window, turning to face her fully. "Selene, I cannot promise that the road ahead will be safe. But I can promise that we will face it together. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Selene swallowed, the warmth of his words mingling with the chill of fear. She wanted to believe him, to hold on to the hope that their bond could survive the chains of duty, the whispers of the court, and the shadows lurking in every corner. A sudden knock at the tower door made both of them tense. Cale's hand went instinctively to his sword, Selene's to the dagger at her belt. But before either could move further, a voice called out softly, "Alpha Cale." It was a young page, trembling slightly, his face pale in the moonlight. "There is trouble in the eastern halls. Some of the guards have been attacked by someone wearing no insignia. They ran into the forest." Cale's expression darkened. "I feared this night would not pass quietly," he muttered. He looked at Selene, his gaze lingering. "Stay here. Do not move from this tower. Promise me." "I promise," she said, though the fear in her heart made her chest tight. Cale moved to the door, his figure strong and commanding. "I will return soon," he said. "And when I do, we will speak of what matters most." Selene nodded, her mind racing. She could feel the pull of destiny, the whisper of danger, and the fire of her love for him. The castle felt suddenly colder, larger, and filled with shadows that seemed to watch her every move. Hours passed slowly. Selene paced the tower, her mind replaying Cale's words. The touch of his hand, the fire in his golden eyes. She felt a strange mix of fear and hope. The court, the castle, the celebrations, they were all illusions compared to the reality of the bond between her and Cale. Outside, the forest stirred. Figures moved in the shadows, and whispers of the wind carried secrets Selene could not yet understand. She pressed her hand against the cool stone of the tower, trying to steady herself. The moon reached its highest point, and the tower was bathed in silver light. Selene felt eyes on her, unseen yet undeniable. She knew this night was only the beginning. The court intrigue, the rival threats, and the dangers lurking beyond the castle walls would test them both. And yet, she felt a spark of hope. Cale's words, his presence, his promise, they were a tether to a future she had thought impossible. Then, a sudden movement at the tower window made her spin. A shadow flitted across the ledge outside. Selene's heart leapt into her throat. She knew instantly. Someone was coming. Someone meant to challenge, to harm, or perhaps to take Cale from her in ways she could not yet imagine. Selene drew a deep breath, her hands steadying on her weapons. Whatever came, she would face it. For Cale, for herself, for the bond that no chain, no duty, and no shadow could ever break. And in the quiet of the northern tower, with the moonlight casting silver and shadow across the walls. Celine realized the truth. The night had only just begun. The forest outside the castle was alive with shadows. Trees towered like silent guardians, their twisted branches scratching at the night sky. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, painting silver patterns across the forest floor. Celine moved cautiously, her senses alert. Every step measured and quiet. The northern tower was far behind her now, and the sounds of the castle, music, laughter, and celebration had faded into memory. She carried Kale's words with her. "Stay behind me. Do not move from this tower." But she could not obey completely. Something in her blood, a fire of loyalty and love, compelled her forward. Kale was in danger, and if she did not act, who else could stand by his side? The night was thick with mist, and Celine's hand rested on the hilt of her dagger. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made her heart leap. Yet, beneath the fear, there was a thrill. She had faced many dangers before, but tonight was different. Tonight, the stakes were higher, and the reward, Kyle, made every risk worth taking. As she moved deeper into the forest, shadows seemed to gather around her. The wind whispered secrets she could not understand. Voices carried on the air that might have been spirits or tricks of her imagination. She paused, closing her eyes. Listening. A low growl echoed somewhere nearby. Celine's hand tightened on her dagger, her body poised for action. Then she saw him. Kale stood among the trees, his armor scratched and dirt-streaked, but his golden eyes were bright and alive. The marks of struggle were clear on the leaves around him, and he bore a wound across his shoulder. Celine's heart leapt into her throat. "Kale," she whispered, rushing to his side. He turned at the sound of her voice, and for a moment, his lips curved into a tired but relieved smile. "Celine," he said softly, his voice carrying both relief and warmth. "I knew you would come." Celine knelt beside him, her hands inspecting the wound. "Why didn't you wait for me?" Kale shook his head. There was no time. The attackers came from the east, from the rival clans. They wanted me, and I had to fight them off. I could not risk the court finding out before the night ended. Celine's eyes softened as she placed her hand on his arm. "You fought alone?" He nodded, wincing slightly as she adjusted the cloth around his shoulder. "I had no choice, but I am not alone now. You are here." The words were simple, but they carried weight beyond speech. In the moonlit forest, among twisted trees and shadows, Kale and Celine were not just alpha and warrior. They were two souls bound together by trust, loyalty, and something deeper than either dared to name. But there was no time to linger. Celine glanced around, noticing the faint glow of figures moving in the distance. "More are coming," she said, rising to her feet, her eyes sharp. Kale stood as well, placing a hand over hers briefly, a touch that sent warmth through her, steadying both of them. "We must move. The curse. It will not wait." Celine frowned. "Curse?" Kale's expression darkened. "There is a forest beyond this one, older than the kingdom. Spirits dwell there, bound to my bloodline. They guard secrets and punish those who trespass. Tonight, they will test us." The two moved together, silent and swift, following the faint paths that twisted through the undergrowth. The deeper they went, the thicker the mist became, until the world seemed to shrink around them, leaving only shadows, moonlight, and the sound of their own breaths. Suddenly, the forest shifted. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches twisting like hands reaching for them. Shadows danced on the mist, forming shapes that were almost human, almost beast. Celine's grip on her dagger tightened. Kale stopped. "The Guardians," he whispered. "They know we are here. They will test us. From the mist, figures began to emerge, tall, spectral beings, eyes glowing faintly. They did not speak, but their presence pressed down on Celine and KL like a weight. The air grew colder, the shadows longer. Celine felt fear rise, but it was tempered by determination. She looked at Kale. "What do they want?" "They want to see if we are worthy," Kale said. "Not just of survival, but of each other." The spirits advanced, circling them in a silent, watchful dance. Kale stepped in front of Celine, his stance protective, yet he did not touch her. He trusted her to act, to fight, to show the courage that had always made him admire her. One of the figures moved closer, reaching out a translucent hand. Celine could feel the cold radiating from it. She held her dagger steady, her heart pounding. Kale's voice cut through the silence. "Do not fear them. They are not enemies, only judges. Show them your strength. Together." Celine nodded. Slowly, she took a step forward, then another, moving in tandem with Kale. Their presence, their bond, seemed to calm the spirits. The guardians' glow dimmed, their forms softening. Yet one remained, taller and darker, watching them with an intensity that made Celine's skin prickle. "You are brave," the spirit said, its voice echoing in her mind rather than through the air. "But bravery alone is not enough. You must trust him, and he must trust you." Kale's hand brushed against hers, a silent affirmation. Celine felt warmth surge through her chest. "I trust you," she whispered. "And I you," he replied. The spirit stepped back, bowing slightly before dissolving into mist. The other guardians followed, leaving only the path ahead, clear but eerie. Celine exhaled, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. Kale turned to her, his gaze intense. "You were magnificent," he said. "Your courage, your heart, it is why you are mine." Celine's cheeks flushed. "Yours?" she repeated, her voice almost trembling. "Even now?" "No." "Yes," he said simply, reaching out to take her hand. The touch sent a shiver of warmth and certainty through her. Even now. And even when the world demands otherwise. They moved forward together, deeper into the forest. The mist began to thin, revealing a small clearing with an ancient stone altar at its center. Moss covered the surface, and faint runes glowed with a soft, silver light. The air seemed charged, alive with the power of centuries past. "This is the heart of the curse," Kale said, his voice low. "Here lies the power that has shadowed my bloodline. It tests, it punishes, but it can also grant strength." Croshen's last. Celine stepped closer to the altar, her eyes scanning the glowing runes. "And we must..." "What? Perform a test?" "What?" "And we must perform a test." Kyle nodded. "We must face what we fear most. Only then will we prove ourselves, not to the curse, but to each other." Celine swallowed, feeling the weight of the words. She thought of the night's events, the wedding, the danger in the castle, the forest, the guardians, and now, this. Every step had tested her courage, her loyalty, and her heart. Yet, she did not falter. She would not falter. Kale stood beside her, their hands brushing, fingers intertwining. A shadow moved across the clearing. Celine stiffened, ready for the unknown. But Kale's hand on hers steadied her. Together, they faced the darkness, ready to meet whatever the curse demanded. And as the moonlight bathed them in silver, Celine realized that this night, terrifying as it was, had revealed the truth they both had known all along. They belonged to each other. Not by duty, not by tradition, but by choice, by bond, by unspoken promise. The forest whispered around them, carrying the echoes of trials past and warnings for the future. Celine's heart pounded, not with fear, but with anticipation, for she knew that the night was not yet over. Danger still lurked, but so did destiny. And in the midst of the cursed clearing, with Kael at her side, Celine felt a fire ignite within her, a fire of love, courage, and unbreakable loyalty. The clearing lay bathed in silver moonlight, the ancient altar casting long shadows across the moss-covered stones. Celine's hand remained tightly intertwined with Kael's. The forest around them was eerily silent now, the rustling leaves having faded into a tense hush. But Celine felt it something, watching from beyond the edge of the trees. Kael's golden eyes scanned the darkness, sharp and alert. "They are close," he whispered. "The one who challenges us is near. Be ready." Celine nodded, her hand tightening around her dagger. Her heart beat fast, not from fear alone, but from the thrill of standing by Kael's side in the face of danger. Every nerve in her body was alive with anticipation. Suddenly, a shadow leapt from the tree line. A figure cloaked in black, moving with unnatural speed, landed before them. The moonlight revealed a mask that hid its face, but the aura of power it radiated was unmistakable. Celine and Kael braced themselves. "Who are you?" Kael demanded, his voice steady but commanding. The figure spoke, its voice hollow and echoing. "I am the test. Only one can pass unbroken. Will you survive what lies within? Or fall?" Kael stepped protectively in front of Celine, his posture firm. "We face it together," he said. "No shadow, no curse, and no danger will break us apart." The figure moved closer, circling them like a predator assessing its prey. The forest seemed to respond. Wind whipping through the branches, leaves swirling in a ghostly dance. The very air felt charged with magic. Celine felt fear claw at her chest, but she forced herself to remain steady. Her eyes met Kael's, and she saw in them the same courage she felt in herself. Together, they were stronger. Together, they were a force no shadow could extinguish. Suddenly, the figure lunged. Celine dodged, rolling across the mossy ground, and swung her dagger instinctively. Kael moved with her, deflecting blows that seemed to strike faster than human speed. Every movement was precise. Every glance calculated. They fought, not just for survival, but to prove themselves worthy, not just to the forest, not just to the curse, but to each other. The shadow figure halted for a moment, then raised its arms. The runes on the altar flared with silver light, casting beams across the clearing. The figure spoke again, its voice now a whisper that echoed in Celine's mind. Kael's hand brushed against hers, grounding her. "Trust me," he said. "We can do this together." Celine took a deep breath, letting the fear wash through her and out again. She realized the test was not just about skill in battle, it was about trust, courage, and the strength of their bond. Every doubt, every hesitation, could be their undoing. The shadow figure lunged again, faster this time. Kael intercepted it, their blades clashing with a sharp, ringing sound. Celine moved to flank the figure, her dagger striking at its side, but the attack passed harmlessly through it, as if it were not entirely real. "It's not flesh," Celine said, astonished. Kael nodded, his jaw set. "Then we must fight with more than weapons. We must fight with our hearts." Celine glanced at him, understanding dawning. They had always fought side by side, but this battle required something deeper. She stepped closer to Kael, letting their hands meet fully, their fingers entwined. A wave of warmth spread through them, as if their bond itself became a shield. The shadow hesitated, recoiling slightly. Its attacks became erratic, less coordinated. Kael's eyes gleamed. "It senses our unity," he said. "Our trust, our courage. We are stronger together." Celine's pulse raced as she stepped forward, matching his rhythm, moving as one. The forest seemed to respond, the wind calming, the shadows shifting. They could feel the power of the curse, the test itself, pressing on them. But they did not falter. Then the figure split into two, then four, each more menacing than the last. Selene felt panic rise, but Kale's hand on hers steadied her. "Focus on me," he said. "Not them. Only on us." Selene nodded, her fear transforming into determination. They moved together, each strike, each dodge, flowing seamlessly. Every glance, every touch, reinforced the truth that no force could sever their bond. The shadows shrieked, the sound echoing through the forest, then suddenly collapsed into mist. The runes on the altar pulsed once, then dimmed. Silence fell. The clearing was calm again, the moonlight peaceful. Kale lowered his weapon, his chest heaving slightly. He turned to Selene, his expression softening. "You were incredible," he said, his voice filled with pride and admiration. Selene smiled, exhausted but exhilarated. "We were incredible," she corrected, leaning slightly into him. Kale's hand brushed against her cheek, gentle and tender. "Together," he murmured. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The forest, the shadows, the trials, they existed only for them. The danger, the fear, and the challenges had passed. And what remained was raw, undeniable truth. Selene felt tears prick her eyes. She had always hidden her feelings, always kept them secret. But here, in the heart of danger, with Kale at her side, nothing needed to be hidden. "Kale, she began, but words failed her. He smiled, leaning closer, brushing his lips briefly against her forehead. "I know," he said softly, "and I feel the same." But even as they shared that quiet moment, the forest whispered warnings. A new shadow moved at the edge of the clearing, larger and darker than before. Selene's heart quickened. The test was not over. This was only the first challenge, and something far more dangerous approached. KL noticed it too, his golden eyes narrowing. "We need to leave," he said, taking her hand firmly. "The curse is old, and it will not allow us to linger." They ran together, moving swiftly through the forest, branches whipping past them, mist swirling around their legs. Each step was careful, each breath measured, yet their hands never parted. The connection between them was a tether, stronger than fear, stronger than shadows. As they reached the edge of the forest, a clearing opened to reveal the castle in the distance. Lights flickered in the windows, but the sense of celebration had ended. Something had changed in the air, a tension that spoke of plots, danger, and tests yet to come. Kale slowed, letting Selene catch her breath. "You have proven yourself tonight," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of sincerity. "Not just in battle, but in heart and courage. You are mine, Selene, and nothing will change that." Selene's chest swelled with emotion. "Even if the world stands against us?" she asked, her voice soft but unwavering. Kale nodded. "Even then, even when all seems lost, I will claim you not as duty, not as obligation, but because you are mine, and I am yours." Selene felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she smiled through them. The trials had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and yet their bond had grown stronger. The fear of loss, the shadow of the curse, the danger from the castle, they had faced it together, and they had emerged unbroken. But even in that victory, the forest whispered another warning. Far beyond the clearing, a figure watched them from the shadows. Its eyes glowed faintly, its presence radiating power and menace. The night's true challenges were far from over. Selene turned to Kale, her hand still tightly in his. "We've survived tonight," she said. "But something tells me this is only the beginning." Kale's expression darkened slightly, though his grip on her hand never wavered. You are right, he said. There are forces at work that we cannot yet see. And when they strike, we must be ready. Celine nodded, feeling the weight of destiny settle over her. The trials had strengthened them, but she knew the path ahead would be even harder. Danger, intrigue, and the unrelenting demands of the curse awaited. Yet with Kale by her side, she felt a fierce certainty. No force could break their bond. As they stood hand in hand, the moonlight casting silver across the forest, Celine realized the truth. Love, courage, and trust were stronger than any shadow, and together, they could face whatever darkness lay ahead. The castle loomed ahead, its towers and spires shadowed under the silver moonlight. Celine and Kale moved swiftly, their hands still intertwined, their hearts beating as one. The forest behind them was quiet now, but the sense of danger lingered, a reminder that the night's trials were not yet over. Kale's golden eyes scanned the horizon. The figure we saw. It waits, he said, his voice low, carrying both caution and resolve. And when it strikes, we must face it together. Celine tightened her grip on his hand. We can face anything, she said. Her voice carried a quiet confidence. A truth she had discovered in the forest, amid shadows, and through the trials that had tested her courage, her loyalty, and her heart. The castle gates were quiet. Guards had been called away to investigate disturbances in other parts of the kingdom, leaving the main courtyard strangely empty. Shadows stretched along the walls, and moonlight glinted off the stone steps. Celine felt a shiver run down her spine, but she held herself steady. Kale was beside her, and that made all the difference. A figure emerged from the shadows atop the highest tower. Tall, imposing, and cloaked in black, its eyes glowed faintly, radiating a cold and ancient power. Celine felt the weight of its gaze like a physical force pressing against her chest. Kyle stepped forward, placing himself between Celine and the figure. Show yourself, he commanded. We are not afraid. The figure's voice echoed through the courtyard, hollow and commanding. Alpha Kale, you have proven courage, skill, and heart. But to claim your destiny, you and your shadow must face one final trial. Only then will your bond be complete. Celine swallowed, feeling the tension coil in her stomach. One final trial? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Kyle nodded, his gaze unwavering. Whatever it is, we face it together. Nothing else matters. The figure raised its arms, and the courtyard transformed. Shadows twisted into shapes of beasts, illusions of warriors, and visions of past failures. Celine gasped, seeing scenes from her own life, moments of doubt, fear, and heartbreak manifested before her eyes. The final trial was not a fight with blades, but a confrontation with fear itself. Kale stepped close, brushing her hand gently. Focus on me, he said. Not the shadows, not the illusions. Only on us. Celine nodded, closing her eyes for a moment. She let Kale's presence fill her mind, steadying her. The fear, the doubt, the pain, all of it began to fade, replaced by something stronger. Trust, courage, and love. When she opened her eyes, Kale's hand was still in hers, their fingers intertwined. Together, he said softly. Always together. 8. The shadows writhed and screamed, their forms shifting, trying to break them apart. But Celine and Kale moved as one, side by side, hearts beating in unison. The illusions of failure, of doubt, began to dissolve under the power of their bond. Your love, your trust, your courage, the figure said, its voice now less menacing, has passed the test. You are worthy. The shadows collapsed into mist, and the courtyard returned to normal. Celine and Kale stood together, breathing heavily, their hands still clasped. Kale turned to her, eyes filled with warmth. "You were incredible," he said. "Every step of the way, your courage, your heart, has proven that we are meant to face this world together." Celine smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "We did it together," she said. "No shadows, no curse, no danger could ever separate us." Kale drew her close, holding her gently yet firmly. "Celine, you are mine," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "Not by duty, not by obligation, but because you are the one I choose. Always." Celine's heart swelled with emotion. "And I am yours," she said, her voice strong, steady, and full of certainty. For a moment, the world fell away. The trials, the shadows, the danger, they no longer mattered. All that remained was the truth of their bond, unbroken, unshakable, and eternal. The figure on the tower descended slowly, revealing itself as a guardian of the forest and the castle, its cloak flowing like liquid shadow. It approached Kale and Celine, bowing slightly. "The curse is lifted," it said. "Your bond is sealed, not by fear, but by love and courage. Together, you are stronger than any force that seeks to divide you." Celine felt a wave of relief wash over her. The trials were over. The shadows had been faced, and their hearts had remained unbroken. The fire that had burned between her and Kale had not only survived, it had grown, stronger, and unyielding. Kale smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Celine, come with me," he said. "There is a future waiting, and it is ours to shape together." Celine nodded, feeling the weight of the night lift from her shoulders. Together, they walked back through the castle gates, hand in hand, each step a testament to the courage, trust, and love that had carried them through the darkness. The castle, once a place of intrigue and danger, now felt alive with possibility. The night air carried the scent of fresh beginnings, and the moon shone as if celebrating their triumph. In the great hall, whispers spread quickly among the remaining guards and courtiers. They had heard of Kale and Celine's bravery, of the shadows and trials they had faced in the forest. Respect and awe followed them wherever they went, but Celine felt no pride. All she felt was the presence of Kale beside her, and the unshakable certainty that they belonged to each other. Kale stopped at the top of the staircase, turning to her. "Celine, whatever the world demands, whatever challenges arise, know this: you are mine, and I am yours." Celine smiled, her eyes shining. "Always," she replied, her voice steady and full of conviction. For the first time, the weight of expectations, duty, and danger felt lighter. They had faced darkness, temptation, and the shadows of their own fears. Yet, through it all, they had found each other, unbroken and unafraid. Kale's hand found hers again, and together, they descended the staircase, ready to face whatever the dawn would bring. The castle, the kingdom, and the world beyond were theirs not by power or obligation, but by choice, courage, and love. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, the guardian from the tower appeared one last time. "Remember," it said softly, "strength is in unity, and courage is born of love. Protect each other, and you shall endure." Kale and Celine exchanged a glance, the meaning clear between them. They had endured the night, the forest, the shadows, and the curse. Together, there was nothing they could not face. Celine pressed her hand to Kale's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "No matter what comes," she whispered, "we will face it together." Kale's golden eyes softened, and he leaned close. "Together," he echoed, sealing their promise with the warmth of his presence. The moonlight shone on them, silver and eternal, as if the night itself had witnessed their bond and blessed it. In that moment, Selene knew with absolute certainty that no shadow, no danger, no curse, and no chain could ever separate them. They were bound, not by fear, not by duty, but by the choice of their hearts. And as the first light of dawn touched the castle towers, Selene and Kael stepped forward, side by side, hand in hand, hearts united into a future that was theirs alone.